Hello and welcome back to Thoughtumentary, the podcast dedicated to interesting and thought-provoking ideas. Today I would like to discuss something that is inherent in all of us and in all things, and that is fundamentally the concept of nature, and more specifically, how you, the person listening to this documentary, can become a force of nature, or rather, be a force of nature, which may at first sound like a egoic, pretentious statement, one made by a person who may have godly aspirations, but as you listen, you'll realize that the truth is actually quite the opposite, and to be one with nature is, as is often told, a process of releasing ego and becoming humble. Humble with what you have. And what you have is the most wondrous thing. Because the truth is, you are the will of nature. And what I mean by that statement, to have will, or to be nature, is perhaps more simply put, to be action, to be something that is happening right now, always has been, and always will be. The word nature is a noun because it is a thing, but it cannot simply be described as an object, and is more closely defined as a process, something that is happening and cannot ever be stopped. For some of you, it may be easy to imagine the process of nature not unlike a stream or a river that flows year-round. It is composed of water molecules that never stop moving in one direction. But this metaphor falls short of encompassing what nature really is, because that stream or river will eventually stop. Perhaps when the water disintegrates, vaporizes, and is released through the atmosphere into outer space, or perhaps when the earth itself ceases to exist because it has been destroyed by one process of nature or another. Therefore, it is easier to describe nature if one compares it to time, which is a man-made concept and not a physical reality, but shares virtually all the same characteristics. When we say the beginning of time, we are referring to an instant where there was nothing prior, nothing at all. No matter, no energy, not even space. But you see, nature is all of these things. And like the idea of time, nature goes on forever. It flows steadily and constantly. And the end of nature is as unbelievable an idea as the end of time. So for the remainder of this discussion, it is important for you to make the distinction that when I use the word nature, I am not using it to describe something that is confined or contained within the planet Earth, but rather the cosmos itself. You could say that as far as it pertains to this universe, nature began with the beginning of this universe, which we affectionately call the cosmos, and could only conceivably end if this universe ends, has an end, or can end. So I will relate this omnipresent, all-encompassing idea to human beings and all that they are, both physical and metaphysical, their role in the cosmos, and most inspirationally, how we are indistinguishable or inseparable from it. We human beings are all born with the will to take action, naturally. No one ever had to persuade an infant to become an adult, or to learn how to talk or walk. We learn by a process of nature. We change involuntarily from beginning to end, and therefore we are all individually bestowed with the supreme gift of choice, which is what separates material that is alive, or life itself, at least as traditionally defined, from everything else, all the other matter that we do not consider alive, something that does not have a will or a conscience. Take, for example, a stone, an object which, although scientifically is very much alive, is something that we generally consider to be dead or not alive. Blow that example up to astronomical proportions, and you could say that an asteroid is not alive, does not contain life, whereas a planet is, and can, probably often does, contain life. But you see, both things are material, just as you are. Atomically, there's no difference between your body and the rock or the asteroid. But all the same, we are born with the will to take action. And we learn over time to hesitate, deliberate, and procrastinate, because in our lives we all experience fear, which is the fundamental emotion or force to which we can attribute all these things. But in spite of fear, all humans are quite literally the will of nature itself, fundamentally. Imagine yourself as the hand of nature. You are the body that executes its plans. And what might the plans of nature, the design, what might that be, you ask? To isolate them, you must simply deduce which part of you is inseparable from everything else, from nature itself. And if you meditate on this, you will eventually deduce that nature's plans are defined, at least as we interpret them, as your instincts. They forever have been and will be. So if you wish to carry out the will of nature, which is something that is not simply good or bad, it is yin and yang, and collectively is diffused by both poles, and is simply neutral, or could more accurately be described as chaotic. So to follow your instincts is to quite literally carry out the will of nature, because they are, after all, synonymous with nature itself. But you may say, some of my instincts are appalling. It's true. Some of us have an instinct to do battle, perhaps all of us, to do war, to subjugate, to rape, or kill. It is important to understand that the universe is chaotic, and although these things exist, and some may have an instinct to commit crimes, consequently, others have an instinct to enact justice. And this is how it works. Not only among humans, but in nature. Now, I don't want you to, after having listened to this, decide, well, I have the instinct to harm. Therefore, it is the will of nature that I harm people or harm things. And although this may be true for you, you must also always reserve the possibility that you are not correctly interpreting your instincts. If you were to commit a crime, for example, have you properly thought out the consequence? You may say, well, I have an instinct to assault somebody because they made me angry. But do you also have an instinct, in addition to the desire, the drive to assault, to thereafter be in prison? Is it your instincts to end up behind bars, to be unhappy? Of all the most vile criminals in human history, not one of them has ever been happy behind bars. Never would they choose for themselves incarceration over freedom. And that is the essence of your instinct. If your instinct is to be free and to be happy, then you could not possibly, truly, want to do a harm. Because these things, after all, when it's all said and done, make us very unhappy. So be very careful when identifying what your instincts truly are. Because there are many layers, and you must grow to distinguish the instincts or the drives of the society, of your ego, of the false identity that you have created, that you call I, me, myself. You must learn to delineate those things from the true instincts, which are the closest things we can observe to divinity or holiness. Because you see, in nature, hate does not exist. When a predator kills, it doesn't do so out of hatred or malice, but only out of necessity. A predator in nature never kills more than it needs, because deep down under it all, its instincts are in keeping with the overall well-being of the ecosystem. If a mountain lion were to go on a rampage and just decide to start assassinating all the deer in the forest just for the pleasure of it, because it's a skilled hunter and hunting brings it pleasure, then the mountain lion would soon find itself in a situation where there are no more deer. The absence of this species creates an imbalance in the ecosystem, and suddenly the lion has no food. Therefore, it must only kill out of necessity, because to do otherwise would result in its own annihilation. And this is something that its instincts, its core, simply cannot allow. So ask yourself deeply, do human beings need to slaughter and consume animals in the present day? I can only say that if you ruminate on this for long enough, you will eventually realize that the answer is beyond the measure of a doubt, no. And if and when you stop eating animals entirely, like so many of us have, you will gain all the evidence that you need to support this conclusion. In fact, the modern human's instinct in nature toward animals is one of compassion and friendship, which is why at some point in our lives we all relish companionship with animals in the form of pets. It's often said that Adolf Hitler, arguably the most vile man in modern history, often compared with Lucifer himself, loved animals. I believe that this is something we fundamentally all have within us, because I mentioned that hate does not naturally exist in the cosmos, that hate itself is just a word and an idea that we use to describe the absence of love or compassion. But you may say, because you've been bestowed with the most gracious gift of choice in your life, you are capable of great errors in your decision-making. But you see, the human race is ultimately subservient to the will of nature, which is why, regardless of generational mistakes that we may make, humanity is rapidly evolving a vegetarian way of existence. Those defiant among us will die off quickly due to bodily incompatibilities with a carnivorous diet, and will eventually become sterile altogether as industrial animal farming becomes more and more difficult on a planet that is no longer willing to accommodate it. In the year 2017, this is already observable, as we have an epidemic of infertility and erectile dysfunction, all resulting from the consumption of meat and dairy products. You see, even when we choose to disobey our instincts and move against the will of nature, nature always prevails. Once again, it is very important to realize that when I use the word nature, I am not simply referring to the ecosystems contained on Earth, but rather the entirety of the cosmos, so that if we humans are defiant into our last breath and expunge ourselves in one way or another, via atmospheric catastrophe, nuclear suicide, so on, that nature continues all the same, forever. It will not even notice the extinction of the human race. You see, this is why we speak of destiny, because above it all, everything truly is preordained. Your DNA is not of your design. Neither is your body. What could be more humbling than that? It is not ultimately under your control. You're merely borrowing it, so that no matter how badly you will yourself to continue eating meat or drinking the milk of a cow, your body will not accept the compatibility. Just as when you're laying on the couch or in your bed, gazing at your phone, you're scrolling through social media feeds and your dream whispers again, sub-vocally inside your skull. And you make the very conscious decision to ignore it again and again and again. You defy your instincts. When nature tells you, start a business, stop working for other people, build the invention, stop putting it off, just get started, and you answer back stubbornly and defiantly, no. And then you go back to scrolling on your phone and nothing changes. It is so important for you to realize that that voice is nature, that it is God. That is your instinct. And you have the choice every day. Do I listen or don't I? The earth is calling to you, the center of the universe, your DNA, your life energy, your body, your mind. The love you carry is begging, please listen. So how are you going to reply to your instincts? If you wish to attain self-actualization in life, if you wish to become an unstoppable person, you must first become a force of nature, or rather, be the force of nature that you already are, which means to become one with your true instinct, to obey the perfection of human design, to act spontaneously, and nature will find you. All you have to do is listen, submit, become. I'd like to thank you for listening to today's broadcast. Please remember to leave your feedback, comments, suggestions for future installments on whichever outlets you've found me on. And I thank you for listening.